Summary question. We'll read the summary. We'll have our own summary at our fingertips, and then look at the options. This is the best strategy to increase your accuracy in summaries. When Hitler rose to power in the early 1930s, public reaction in Britain was not that of unalloyed horror. It was not just, oh my God, Hitler has come to power. The public reaction to Hitler coming to power was not of horror or pure horror. Instead, what was the public's reaction in Britain? It lay somewhere between disinterest, snobbish, if inaccurate, contempt, and in some circles, quiet satisfaction that a vigorous reformer had shaken up his country in an apparently effective and forward looking fashion. So, what was the British reaction? Not unalloyed horror, not pure horror, but a mix of disinterest. Some were just not snobbish, contempt, and in some circles, satisfaction. What was the satisfaction? Or at least somebody has shaken up the system. Okay. The evils of the Nazi regime were obvious to anyone with either a social conscience or a knowledge of history, but it was more convenient either to ignore them or, in the case of a group of well meaning but misguided society figures, to attempt to mitigate them by means of the so called Anglo-German fellowship. He says it was the evils of Nazi system was open, but it was obvious to anyone who had a conscience or who had a knowledge of history of how much Nazism was wrong. But it was more convenient in England among the British to either ignore the evils of Nazism or, in some cases, to try to make it look less harmful, to mitigate it, to lessen it by the reason of the Anglo-German fellowship, that England and Germany, English speaking and German speaking, have this bonding, and so they would not the evils of Nazism was kind of ignored or made to look less harmful than it was. Okay, so this is it. Let's see which option gives these main points best. Look out for options which misrepresent what has been said in the passage. A wrong word here, a wrong word there, okay, which will make the meaning entirely different. The British reaction to Hitler's rise was not quite what was expected, as people turned a blind eye to the evils of the Nazi regime and were rather satisfied. What has it done? One, it says it was not quite what was expected. Has he said here that the reaction was expected to be horror and it was not what it was expected to be? So the question of what was expected doesn't seem to ring true. When Hitler rose to power, the British largely chose to ignore the evils of the Nazi regime, yes, and reacted with a mixture of indifference and disdain. Good. They tended to ignore, turn a blind eye to the evils of the Nazi regime, right? For different reasons, Anglo-German fellowship or just convenience. And the second one, what was the reaction? Reaction was mixed: indifference, disdain, contempt, whatever. Therefore, B seems to have got all the points right. Let's look at if there's a better one. Britain was divided in its response. Did it say that the whole of Britain was divided into two parties? He said the mixture was either this or that. It was a mixture. He didn't say it was divided, that there were parties which says, oh, support Hitler or against Hitler. He said the mixture was not horror. It was rather a mixture of blah, blah, blah. Right? So the fact that Britain was divided in its response is not correct. Hitler's rise to power produced an indifferent, satisfied, and smug reaction from the British, who chose to mitigate his evils through the Anglo-German fellowship. All the points put together, it was not his evils, it was the evils of the Nazi regime. Hitler had not yet done his evils. It was after he came to power that all the evils came across. So the passage talks of the evils of Nazism and not Hitler's personal evils. Second one, everything seems to have been put together in this, right? So the clear, coherent summary there, therefore, is B.